let's talk budgeting. Hi guys, it's Little Gem from Little Gem's Adventures. I'm going to be talking to you about how I budgeted for my 6 months travelling to New Zealand and Australia. I had already constructed a plan of where I was going, when I was going. That is the first thing that you have to do. One thing that I did is I split my budgeting into different categories. I split it into flights, accommodation, buses, food and activities. I'll explain later why I've put food and activities together. First up is flights. I went onto Skyscanner and looked up the flights to New Zealand 6 months in advance, and I went 3 pages in after sorting the pages into price from low to high. And the reason why I did that is I would pick the flight that's right at the top of the 3rd page and write that down as my budget for the flight. I wouldn't be buying a flight so late, I'd be buying it more in advance, and so I knew that it wouldn't be that price, that would be my maximum for that flight. I did the same thing for the flight home, but I actually looked a year in advance because I knew that obviously I was going for 6 months. Flights excluding Tasmania, because that was not part of my original plan, I budgeted £2,200. The amount of money that I actually spent on flights, excluding my Tasmania flights, was £2,140, which is pretty much bang on the money. Including my Tasmania flights, which again were an extra, I spent 2,300 odd, which is not that much over for 2 more extra flights. Next up is the accommodation. One thing that I found really useful to budget for accommodation is looking on the STA website, and that actually has a New Zealand and Australia page where it tells you the average prices for certain things. One of those things was accommodation. The price bracket for New Zealand hostels was £10 to £15 and the Australian hostels was £11 to £15. What I decided is I'm going to take the higher bracket, and then that way I will have a lot of money for hostels, and if I want to pay for something that's like an Airbnb, which I did, then I have the enough amount of money to do that, or if I have a more expensive hostel. I didn't really skimp out as such on hostels. We made sure that we actually liked the places. We didn't always go for the cheapest just because sometimes they weren't very nice, and so we did actually pick hostels that we wanted to stay in. Especially in Australia, we paid quite a bit more than you would on average because we had air-conditioned rooms, because we felt as though we could not go without. For accommodation, I budgeted £2,700 just because I had worked out £15 for the amount of days that I was planning on travelling. The amount of money that I spent was actually £2,630, which again is pretty much spot on. The next thing that I budgeted for was transportation, and this for me was our bus passes. I looked up the Greyhound and the Kiwi Experience bus passes, the ones that I knew that I wanted early enough without any discount on. That for me was around £1,200. That was my budget. What I actually spent on my bus passes, because I managed to get them a lot cheaper through discounts or haggling, was £930, so I saved quite a bit there. Last of all, I put together food and activities. For this, I actually looked on the STA website again and looked at the food bracket. It said that the average you'd spend is £6 to £9. Now what I did is I times that by 2 because I thought I'm going to be having 2 big meals. And then again, I times that by how many days I was there for. So I timesed it 18 by however many days I was there for. This came up to £4,500, and again, the reason why I put this as food and activities is I knew I wasn't going to be spending that much on food because I wouldn't eat out every day. What I actually spent on food was £1,200. That's obviously a really big save and under what food would be. That's why I put it as food and activities. In activities, I spent £3,300. That is including Tasmania. Overall, that was £4,500. If you exclude Tasmania from that, that's £4,100. So again, I spent less. The budget that I had was £11,000 and I actually spent £10,800. But if you take away Tasmania, which I didn't initially plan for, I spent £10,250. Quite a big difference. But again, that's why I over budgeted, so that I could do more activities that I wanted to do that I didn't necessarily plan for. I knew that I was going to be doing more expensive activities in New Zealand compared to Australia. New Zealand, I knew that I wanted to do a skydive. I planned for a bungee jump, didn't do one. And also a heli hike and river rafting. They are expensive, whereas I knew that in Australia really all I was going to be doing is going on the odd tour and surfing and sitting on a beach. One thing that I cannot stress enough, although my budget was £11,000, do not go travelling with just that amount. Make sure you are prepared to spend maybe £1,000 more, because two things happened for me. One, my phone broke, so I had to buy a new one. Two, COVID happened. I had to buy flights home very quickly because my original flights were cancelled. And obviously I could afford that because I had the money there saved over from the budget anyway. But if I didn't, then at least I would have had some extra with me for that emergency. One thing that I used that was extremely helpful for me is an app called Tripcoin that kept track of what I was spending. Now that does mean that you have to input it manually. This here is Tripcoin. Scroll down and see each day's and input what you have spent on what, and you can also put them into categories. It will show you the statistics of what you have spent and the percentage of what you have spent, and then there's a daily one as well for kind of daily average. I hope this was helpful for everyone. That is all for now, and hopefully you'll be that little bit better at budgeting with some hints and tips from me.